We're going live. Is it live now? Anyway, Mariella's here.
I've left my tank top behind. I need someone to bring it for me.
Why do you need a tank top?
Because there's a reason.
Oh.
Yeah. Can we get someone to grab my tank top from on top of my handbag? Thank you very much.
Why do we need a tank top?
There's a reason. Just because I don't want you to feel alone.
Oh, hang on. Are we live on...
How would we know? This is not very good. Let me just chat to listeners. A few
Why don't you
weeks
tell us
ago,
what's on your show?
I will tell you what's on my show. Well, we're still continuing with our Education Week. We've got Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales. I don't know if you heard yesterday. I certainly hope you were listening because Lord Blunkett was on the programme giving some incredibly sage and also inspiring advice about what we should be doing about the education system. Mark Drakeford's going to be on today talking in particular about his government's planned expansion of free school meals, but he'll also be telling me about his life in politics and why he is standing down at the next election. But I think the topic of free school meals is very much in the zeitgeist at the moment, and the idea that at least at primary school it should be something that we seriously consider as a society and has the potential to actually make fundamental difference in the same way as like starting the NHS did. And on that note, I will be talking to Baroness Stroud, who's going to be talking about the Poverty Strategy Commission report that calls out parties on both sides of the House for allowing millions of low-income families to fall into a poverty trap that basically sees people surviving, not living, or surviving, not actually living in any way. We'll also be looking at the life and times of John Warnock, the man who took on Apple and Microsoft several times during his career as the boss of Adobe. I'm not sure if we'll count him as the winner or loser in that battle. There will be a generation now who perhaps don't know so much about Adobe. And we're also celebrating Hakeem Addy, who has been shortlisted for the very revered Wolfson History Prize for his book African and Caribbean People in Britain, A History. But it's just weeks after he was made redundant in cost-cutting measures. So, you see, a typical example of how life gives and how life takes away, Matt Chorley. Now, are you going to remind people that a few weeks ago...
Yes. So, we are live on YouTube.
Well, that's excellent news.
So that is a start.
Oh, and I've got my tank top. Hold on, I'm taking off my headphones for a minute.
Okay, fine. So, a few weeks ago on the show, Mariella, I think we started off talking about hobbies and...
We did.
Things that you do which puts your mind... You take your mind off things.
Relaxes you.
And you mentioned doing watercolours when you're on your holidays.
On holidays, taking one of those little watercolour boxes with me and painting, taking one of those little books of postcards. And it was the
day that David Hockney had painted...
Harry Styles.
Friend of the show. And...
what, David Hockney?
It wasn't... I think some people discussed it wasn't great, the David Hockney...
Well, I mean, it has its fans,
yeah,
I have to say.
There's more people have fans of...
But you and I were slightly arrogantly...
We got carried away.
Picking away at his technique, and we got carried away, as we tend to.
And so we thought we'd have a competition. That Mariella would paint me, and I would paint Mariella.
Yeah.
And then we would present them to a grateful nation, to a dozen of people on YouTube. And
because it's to do with Matt, there has to be a winner and a loser.
Of course, there has to be a winner and a loser. So,
and what does the wait? What does the winner get or the loser lose?
I think just bragging rights.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel I've actually got a call out today, which is relating to this. I'm hoping to play a clip from it because it's that moment, where you, my husband once said to me very early on in our relationship, he said that he could bake brilliant pastry. And I was having a dinner party for 12 people, and he said, no problem at all, I'll bake a really great apple pie for the dessert. And he started constructing this thing that looked more like Close Encounters of a Third Kind, that pile of clay that he keeps modelling, and brought it in. It was completely unedible. It turned out he'd never made pastry before in his life.
Well,
but actually
I thought
it worked.
It was a new competition, and I'm very good at making pastry.
I admired his chutzpah,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
actually that's probably the reason I married him, was because he
are.
had that kind of fly by the seat of his pants attitude. So I'm looking to listeners to tell me about their moments where they've perhaps slightly over-exaggerated their skill set, which is how I'm feeling right now.
So,
yes,
we've got the Take Heart music. All we need is a couple of art experts.
Oh, no, let's not.
Joan Bakewell,
not Joan,
host of Portrait Artist of the Year.
That's right, I do.
A brilliant art critic.
I love Portrait Art of the Year, and you are going to be appalled Joan.
We promise you, Joan, you're going to be appalled. That is really embarrassing. You've got Joan Bakewell. I mean, cultural critic par excellence. And now you're going to expose my absolutely non-existent portrait painting skills.
I shall do it tenderly.
Oh, thank you, Joan. Yes, please be kind, because I'm feeling quite raw. It's taken one of those things, when you have it on your to-do list and then it gets closer and closer to the moment when it has to be delivered. Every journalist's kind of Otis what am I trying to say? Otis. Thank
Gonna
you.
drink. But it's not just Joan.
What?
We've also got the Times art critic, Laura Freeman.
Oh, for heaven's
Hello.
sake. Oh, no. I have to have serious conversations
Hello,
with Laura
Laura.
Freeman about art. She's never going to speak to me again.
Chief art critic of the Times.
Oh,
Laura
the
Freeman.
embarrassment. I'm bright pink.
And it's good because in the week that everyone was passing comment on Theresa May's portrait and saying, was it good or not? I think what we're about to demonstrate is it's harder than people think. So, we're live on if you want to go to the Times Radio YouTube channel, you can watch along live now. Better than watching paint dry this, says someone.
Yeah, but only just.
Yes, I think you will be able to vote. We'll do a poll in a minute online as to which. So who's going to go first?
Well, you go first.
Okay.
You go first.
Now, I should explain.
Oh, yeah.
I found what I thought was quite a good photo of you to work from.
Yeah, this is going to be
Because you had a nice
embarrassing.
jaunty jumper. So I thought that's, that'll draw the eye.
Yeah.
And I basically spent quite a long time doing that. And then when I turned my attention to the face, it sort of slightly lost its way.
Well, I'm just revealed that I'm just relieved that I'm wearing clothing, because after Andy Taylor insinuated I'd answered a door with very few clothes on, not true, by the way, in the 1980s, I thought Matt might take that as his cue.
No. So are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
braced. I'm. Oh my God, this is going to be awful. What?
Okay, this is live on the YouTube channel. This is my portrait of Mariella Frostrup.
Do you know, that is not as bad as I expected, to be quite honest.
But the thing is, if you look at it like that, you think, well, that's quite. The
Well,
stripes
sorry,
on the jumper.
it's a portrait. You can't say if you look at it from the neck down.
What I should have I should have done you wearing sunglasses.
That would have been truly cheating, wouldn't it?
Joan, what do you think?
Well, I think it's colourful. I think the background is wonderful. I love that dark basis on which you set Mariella.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
think
worry when the critic is talking about the background. I'm just highlighting.
It's a good quality
Background
paper.
matters hugely. A background
don't
matters.
say that.
And I admire the sweater.
Yes, good. But we're not really talking about the fact the eyes are very high on the head. Laura, your thoughts?
I like the stripiness. That's very Harry Styles done by Hockney. Good, zingy colours on the jumper. I think the face isn't quite right. I actually, do you know what bothers me? I think it's the hair, because the art of the bob, and Mariella, she cuts her bob just above the chin, and I think the bob has gone too long and looks mumsy.
Oh,
It's not
you
quite
idiot,
right.
Matt.
Yeah.
How could you get the bob wrong?
The bob's gone too mumsy. That was definitely.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
very much. Yes.
Yeah.
Not nearly youthful enough. Now, okay, can I make a speech now about mine? I started with the drawing. I was really happy with the drawing. I can't paint. I honestly can't paint. I only painted the painting last night because I felt pressured into it, at which point I realised that I had no white amongst my acrylics. I only had yellow, blue and brown.
Right.
And a bit of gold, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with the gold. So I'm just pointing out that I didn't have the tools to necessarily
Right.
do my best, but also, secondly, that I really can't paint. And I'm hoping this is a modernist nightmare. Which
over
where would
here.
you like to see it? But I think that there is something of Matt to this drawing stroke painting. And I want you to know it's not meant to be realist. And I don't know if you know also about his cake penchant. Look, he's holding his face in dismay.
Which school does it belong to? Does it, Mariella?
Nursery, I think.
Yeah, nursery stroke surrealist. What do you think? I mean, I nearly went cubist, but then I thought that would be cheating.
I feel much better about mine now.
Joan's about to say that she thinks cubist would have been possibly a better.
I think it would look very remarkable on a school wall.
Yes, well, I mean, I think that's fair.
So we should expect there's a yellow background to this.
I only had 4 colours and no white.
And gold, it turns out. You've got gold and silver.
Hence, you've got a crown.
So I'm wearing a crown with the king of cakes, Le Roi de Gâteau in French.
And have you seen on your tank top?
And I've got some cakes on my tank top. You gave up, didn't you, on the tank top?
Yeah, it was really difficult to paint the little cakes.
Right. And it looks nothing like me. And I've got bright red lipstick on.
I disagree. I do think it looks like bring Laura in here.
Laura, what do you think, Laura? I think she was just a gog.
I have a note, which is your producer, Mariella, has sent me your preliminary studies, which we'll call them very formally. And the preliminary studies are really good.
Oh, OK. Have you got your preliminary studies?
I think we should put those up on the screen for the listeners.
OK.
Because there are 2 pencil drawings, which I think are quite early career Lucian Freud, sort of, 1940s Kitty Garman era. And then there's
a bit of a shine on it, isn't there?
That is slight. The lightness on your drawings
I
is
think
better.
that's quite. I know, because I can't paint, but you kept insisting that paint had to be involved, which is what threw me, and which is why I put it off till the last minute.
Mariella, there's a little watercolour study, isn't there?
How many have you done?
No. I just did this cubist version.
Yeah,
I don't know if Oh, yes, the watercolour one. No, but that was silly. That just made him look like a baby. Made him look like that. What's that creature you're always compared to? Pog. Or something. Pob.
Yeah.
No, but I would say I like that little coloured study because I think it gets something of Matt's kind of puckishness. And I think sometimes with a portrait, you're not necessarily going for absolute kind of likeness. It's spirit. And I think that little version, which you should get up on YouTube, I think gets a bit of the Chorley magic across.
I think that what you're both missing, not to be rude, is that Matt actually has a rather pugnacious and quite worried face sometimes, which you won't have had to witness. But every time I walk in the studio, I see. And I think I've captured my Matt. And look at the lips. Gorgeous.
Gorgeous red lips.
Gorgeous red lips.
So if somebody
Like
from the social
Puck himself.
if somebody from the social team is listening and they want to do a poll on the YouTube channel as to which is the best, no, they're not. They're not listening.
No, they're not listening. Nobody ever listens. But I would like to enter my drawing rather than my painting, if possible, because I am happier
Matt's
with
the winner for
drawing.
me, says Nick. Matt should have that as his Twitter pic. I'm not putting that as my Twitter picture. I could see a semblance of Matt in Mariella's interpretation of him.
Thank you.
The preliminary study is much better. The pencil one's actually like Matt. Mariella wins in my book, but Matt's face is much rounder and real. Oh, you can...
Yeah, I know.
off.
My daughter said that you might have thought it was unkind what I started with. It was more global.
Well, there we are. Get online and have a look. We'll tweet the picture. We'll do a vote.
Very stressful.
Joan, just quickly, who was the best?
I think probably your painting was the better. It's very hard to
Joan,
get portions
centuries of friendship. You've let me down enormously. What was the point of sending you all those hampers?
No, Mariella, you must enter for the Portrait Artist of the Year competition.
Yeah, as a sitter. Laura, who do you think was the best?
You're both better than Rishi Sunak.
Laura, I love you.
Oh, yes, after he painted the bee the other day. Oh, here we are. There is now a poll. Who's your winner? Well, Matt, I'm going to vote for. There we are.
Yeah, it's a bit unfair that it's on your show, the poll, isn't it?
Get it
so,
online. Well, it's
could
on the YouTube
Mariella
channel.
listeners please do a pile-on to Matt's show and do some voting for me quickly? Though I actually don't expect to win. It's not a great painting, but I do think that I've added humour and captured something of you.
There is something there.
And Le Roi de Gâteau.
Yes.
I mean, that's a title you're going to treasure, isn't it?
Stuart's emailed in saying, what are you going to do with them once they've been completed? How about an
them
auction?
for charity.
With the proceeds going to a charity of your choice, I will start off £50 for your portrait of Mariella and 50p for her portrait of you.
Oh, well, I think he's decided on which one he prefers. But I don't mind. It's all for charity.
We'll work out how that works. That sounds logistically complicated. But we'll try and work
But if you're a charity listening and hoping to be our designated charity, don't hold your breath. I think it's fair to say.
Very good. Thank you very much. That was fun. Thank you to Laura and to Joan Bakewell as well. And look forward to the return of Portrait of the Artist of the Year and us both getting an invitation to that, Mariella. I think that
Yes,
would go very
a
well.
party at least. At least we know we're good at drinking.
Mariella's now just standing
I
in front of the
need one
camera on
now.
YouTube, packing up
Sorry,
her
who needs to see
shopping
your
bag
face anymore?
Right, get on the YouTubes
Bye
now. Lara Spirit's going to be here to talk up PMQs Unpacked. That's coming live. Tim Shipman at midday. Up next, we've just got the list of schools in England which have got the rack concrete. So we'll do that as well. We'll do that next here on Times Radio.
Times Radio Breakfast, tomorrow morning from 6 on Times Radio.
Rosie Wright is still with us for one more day, and in among all the politics in a frenetic first week back in Parliament, we'll be looking ahead to the Rugby World Cup.
Andrew Riley will be here with his favourite letters. Anne Widdecombe and Ross Hawkins will look through the news with us after 9.
Times Radio Breakfast, tomorrow morning from 6 on Times Radio. Listen to Times Radio on your DAB digital radio.
Mum, I can't find my phone. Family life is full on, so you need broadband that can handle full pressure. Say hello to full fibre broadband, the UK's most reliable broadband technology at Vodafone. Built for family life, but not a full price. From only £25 a month for 24 months. Switch to Vodafone. Reliable full fibre broadband without the price tag.
CPI plus 3.9% increase each April. Credit and availability checks apply. Terms and verification at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
I'll be the level head in churning seas. I'll be the hand that pulls someone from the water. I'll be there on the lifeboat when it launches. I'll be there because I've left the RNLI a gift in my will. Will you be there too? 6 in 10 lifeboat launches are only possible thanks to gifts in wills. Large or small, they are the volunteers' protection at sea. For your free gifts in wills guide, search RNLI Wills.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Very good morning to you. It's Matt Chorley live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel. If you want to find us, go to YouTube, search Times Radio, hit subscribe, and then, we're live right now. Hundreds of people watching along and arguing about whether or not my portrait of Mariella was better than hers. Oh, she's now winning the poll. 65% say her painting was better. Who's your winner? Right, very good. Get on the line and vote. Now, we've got PMQs Unpacked coming live in a few minutes' time. Tim Shipman will be here to pause the action, as we always do. Rather than just putting it on and going making a coffee, which is what they do on every other radio station. Lara Spirit, Times Red Box editor, is here. And Lara, we already knew that Keir Starmer was going to go big on the situation of concrete in schools because he's visited a school this morning and told everyone that that's what he's going to do. But just minutes before PMQ starts, some breaking news from the Department for Education.
Yes, so we have the list of 104 schools that have been identified as having RAC concrete. That has now been published. Of course, over the weekend, it wasn't even looking certain. Before a huge amount of pressure was given to the government, it wasn't even looking certain we would be seeing this list in full. Then on Monday morning, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, did indeed announce that that list would be published. Now, it's not the full and total list of schools that will have this concrete, of course, because as we well know from Gillian Keegan's very frustrated remarks, peppered with some colourful language, as many as 5% of schools are yet to actually return their surveys, and so they're unable to say exactly how many have. But that initial list of 104 has been published. Many parents across the country, of course, will be going on there to check whether or not theirs has been affected if they didn't already know. And I think we'll be hearing a lot more over the coming days about the minority who haven't yet returned their surveys.
I mean, the truth is that almost everyone will know if their school is on the list because the school should have told them by now.
Mitigation.
This is more an exercise in sort of bringing them all together. The fact that the government has rushed the list out now, I suppose, means that Keir Starmer might have to drop one of his questions at PMQs today.
Yes, although the list, before the list, we saw Scotland release a list of those schools that had it there. So it's not necessarily clear that this was, I think it'd be difficult to say that this was the government just trying to scupper, in some sense, Keir Starmer's performance at PMQs. But I think unlikely that you'll see Keir change tack now, seeing that this is a gift that keeps on giving politically for him. As you say, he visited a school this morning. He's keen on touting his record of running public services, and he wants to speak directly to this issue and specifically to tie it to Rishi Sunak's time in the Treasury, which of course is the subject of much criticism at the moment, and this idea that he himself is personally responsible for blocking funding for new schools building, and Labour really want people to associate this particular crisis with Rishi Sunak.
And in fact, if you want to see the full list of schools with RAC, I will tweet it Now, there is the list, which has just been... So you want to go to my Twitter X account, whatever it's called, @MattChorley. There's a list there which is just been published by the Department of Education. It's broken down by primary and secondary and the different types of schools they are. Interestingly, most of them still say all pupils in face-to-face education, albeit that might be not in the buildings they were expecting. Some of them, including Hornsey School for Girls, Sir William of York Catholic Primary School, Hatfield Peveril St Andrews Junior School, Our Lady's Catholic High School, they've had to delay the start of term. And they're the ones which the focus is going to really be on, is how long is it going to take for schools to get pupils back into lessons, given that they've had to delay, having just been off for 6 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. A number of schools in there who will have indeed had to make separate mitigations. And this is something that, we heard Grant Shapps, the new Defence Secretary, on the airwaves this morning, really keen to make the case that actually it's not, in a minority of cases, you're seeing that the school buildings are being closed and these children are having to actually move to other schools and other sites. Actually, there are a variety of different measures that are in place. It's not as simple as saying, this has led to a huge number of children being bussed around. That's not necessarily accurate. But on this list, Tony Blair's son's former school, the London Oratory School, on that list. I don't think that if you look through this list, it's necessarily those, it's a huge variety of schools from across different corners of the country. I think when you, as we are doing now, scrolling through this list, makes it clear that actually this is something that is going to be affecting so many areas and so many corners of the country that Rishi Sunak is already struggling to hold on.
In fact, looking at this, about 20, I think, who've delayed the start of term. 4 have moved to fully remote learning, and then about 20 or so are doing a mix of face-to-face and remote, and the rest say that they are able to do face-to-face education for all pupils, but obviously with some mitigations in place. We should say that this morning, actually, the First Minister in Scotland, Humza Yousaf, has said that a list of schools in Scotland with the reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC, will be published by the end of this week. And he will spend what we need to spend to ensure effective buildings are safe. Then there's also, I think there's at least 2 schools affected in Wales.
Yeah, and Scotland has published that list, published it at 11 a.m. just before, a list of 30 schools that had been published. Sorry, it wasn't Scotland. That has been separately published by news agencies, which has listed 30. So if there are more, that will also need to be published subsequently.
And again, this is an example. I suppose, actually, when this is all the focus is on Rishi Sunak, and did he know what was happening, and should he have cut this or not done that? The big, and clearly today, Keir Starmer's going to try and pin all of this on him and the Conservatives and the age of austerity. But the truth is, actually, the Conservative government at Westminster seems to have been slightly quicker on all of this. Wales still haven't published a list. It's not totally clear that they're across what's going on. Scotland haven't published the list either. And education being devolved means that all political parties are culpable.
Yes, and we see that with regard to the health service, don't we? A key attack line from the Conservatives often is that Labour-run Wales is worse than we've seen in England. And if it turns out that that might be the case here, is that something that the Conservatives might want to say? Of course, that goes to the heart of what Gillian Keegan really wanted to convey in that ill-advised hot mic moment, that idea that actually this was the symptom of proactivity, of, in the words of her and Nick Gibb, caution. And there's this message of this is an abundance of caution. Of course, the communication of that, I think, has left somewhat much to be desired. But the sentiment is very much that they want people to know that they are trying to be on the front foot with this.
And Tim Shipman's here. How are you, Tim?
I'm very well.
Are you scrolling through this list as well?
No,
not yet. You've only just
I'm
arrived.
scrolling through my email, if the truth be told.
This is quite a big moment now. Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, first time in, 7 weeks, we think? We've seen them together?
Well, I mean, it's sort of the future starts here, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got party conference season approaching. We've got a general election approaching after that. This is the start of the rest of our lives. And the Prime Minister is going to be on the rack, I think, isn't he?
I think you're right. Well, we might. Tim Shipman, the Sunday Times chief political commentator, is here live in the studio. And we will, as we always do, pause the action live from the House of Commons as Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak go at it for the first time in ages, and they've got plenty to talk about. We're live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel. PMQs Unpacked is next.
Across the UK on DAB. online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs Unpacked, but first a look at the headlines this lunchtime. The Department for Education has published the list of schools in England which were affected by dangerous concrete and set out whether students are getting in-person teaching still or not. There are about 140 schools on the list, including primary and secondary schools. Dozens have had to either delay the start of the new term or move to remote learning. In other news, sentencing Lucy Letby cost taxpayers £2.5 million. The former nurse was found guilty of murdering several babies. She also received nearly £1 million in legal aid. That's according to the Ministry of Justice. The stepmother of the 10-year-old girl who died in Surrey last month has said her family, who's thought to be in Pakistan, is in hiding out of fear for their lives. She says they are willing to cooperate with British authorities over the death of Sarah Sharif. The Labour MP, Chris Bryant, has been appointed Shadow Minister for Creative Industries and Digital. It means he has to stand down as the head of the Commons Ethics Watchdog, the Commons Standards Committee. And we'll have a full news update at midday at right here on time. 1 o'clock, in an hour's time here on Times Radio. But now, live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
And Tim Shipman, the Sunday Times chief political commentator, is here. I was trying to work out, it's 7 weeks since we were last here, but was it even him? He missed a few towards the end of last term, didn't he, Rishi Sunak?
He missed quite a few. I think he did the last one, didn't he? And did all right, actually. But there's quite a lot of problems piling up.
Quite a lot
since
of problems. And I think everyone in Westminster spoke to someone in the Labour Party who says you literally couldn't have made up a row which suited their purposes better than this one.
No, nothing works in Britain. Public services are falling apart. The government are useless, and some of its ministers have taken leave of their senses. They've got a sort of belief that they're doing brilliantly when they're not. It's all there, isn't it? But, whisper it quietly, that presents a little challenge to the Labour Party if we're going to try and make this PMQs something other than just a massacre for the government. It's a sort of wide open goal with a goalkeeper with his knees tied together and a ball, made of explosives. Is Keir Starmer going to destroy Rishi Sunak, or is he going to punt it wide and blow his own foot off? Neil Kinnock got into all sorts of trouble in the past when he had what were perceived to be open goals that he was unable to sort of slot the ball away.
And actually, Ed Miliband, Jeremy Corbyn, there was one I remember, when Ian Duncan Smith resigned as Work and Pension Secretary, Jeremy Corbyn didn't mention it.
Yeah. I mean,
at PMQs.
I don't think there's much danger of that. And I enjoyed our lunch so much, Matt, that I'm going to bet you that the school concrete scandal comes up again.
That is not a bet that I'm willing to take. Listeners might remember that earlier in the summer, Tim lost a bet. He bet that Keir Starmer would definitely mention Boris Johnson during PMQs, and then he didn't. So we went for lunch instead.
So I'm trying the trick again.
And you can listen back to that on the Red Box podcast, The Art of the Political Lunch. And very nice it was too. I'm not taking that bet today, though. It's interesting, though, Keir Starmer this morning has been repeatedly asked what would be the Labour plan, and he said he would not engage in sticking plaster politics.
Yeah. What about
it's not necessarily going to hold.
Breeze block politics?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, that gives a little bit of hope to the people who are currently slotting Rishi Sunak into his suit of armour, strapping on the metal plates and saying, "Don't worry, boss, it'll all be fine. You get yourself out there. It'll all be fine. Don't you worry." But he does feel a bit like a man in a sort of suit of armour who's about to face a lightsaber or a...
If I was Keir Starmer, I'd be tempted just to ask about something else.
Totally different. At least to begin with. Throw him. Just throw him. Yeah. See what happens.
Well, let's find out then. We are live on Times Radio, live on the Times Radio YouTube channel. We will pause the action as we go along to explain what is happening. Let's go live to the House of Commons. This is Keir Starmer on question number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in congratulating the Lionesses and his comments about Sergeant Saville? I think we all speak for the whole House when we speak on that subject. I'd also like to extend the warmest welcome to our new Labour member for Selby and Ainsty.
So one of the by-elections.
He's
earlier in
already
the summer.
made history for the Labour Party by overturning the largest Tory majority ever in a by-election. And I'd also welcome the honourable members for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Somerton and Frome.
One Tory, one
Mr.
Lib Dem.
Speaker, the roof of Singlewell Primary School in Gravesend collapsed in May 2018. Thankfully, it happened at the weekend and no children were injured. The concrete ceiling was deemed dangerous and liable to collapse, and everyone knew the problem existed in other schools. Yet the Prime Minister decided to halve the budget for school maintenance just a couple of years later. Does he agree with his Education Secretary that he should be thanked for doing a good job?
Mr. Speaker, I know how concerned parents, children and teachers are, and I want to start by assuring them that the government is doing everything it can to fix this quickly and minimise the disruption to children's education. We make no apology for acting decisively in the face of new information. And let me provide the House with an update on where we are. Of the 22,000 schools in England, the vast majority won't be affected. In fact, in 2/3 of inspections of suspected schools, RAC is not actually present. And to tackle the 1% of schools that have been affected so far, the 1%, we are assigning each of those schools a dedicated caseworker and providing extra funding to fix the problem. In the majority of cases, children will attend school as normal, and the mitigations take typically just days or weeks to complete. We will do everything we can to help parents, support teachers, and get children back to normal school life as quickly as possible.
Keir Starmer.
OK, let's pause that there, Tim. Not a surprise that Gillian Keegan's comments that nobody thanks us for doing our jobs, and the vast majority of schools are unaffected. But clearly, Rishi Sunak trying to actually communicate some of the stuff they haven't really managed up until this week, the detail of what they're actually doing, rather than being cross that people are criticising them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and actually, that wasn't too bad a moment for Sunak. He kind of did sound like he was on top of it. I spent most of the answer partly listening to the words, but also watching the cutaway shots to Gillian Keegan, who was sort of nodding gently and mouthing "it's true" and "yes" to the opposition as they were clearly barracking her across the chamber. We know that this is a problem that's been around for a long time. They have got new information. They are acting on it. But really, it's one of those things where nobody's really had a grip on this for a very long time. And be interesting to see how Starmer takes this on now. I mean, he's kind of, he got the obvious jibe out of the way early. Sunak's now done his statesman-like, response,
doing,
but he can't do that for the next 5 questions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he can have a go.
And
he probably will.
And it will be interesting to see if he manages to sort of keep it together, or does he get ratty?
This has one of those little temper tantrum moments for Sunak written all over it, it seems to me. And if he can avoid doing that, then...
And clearly what Keir Starmer wants to do is try and needle him.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak can be right that this is, 1% of schools. But 1% of schools shut. If the opposition can pin the charge on the government, 1% of schools shut as a result of your incompetence.
Yes, and it's like
that's still a charge.
It's
that will
like
stick.
that tweet that the Labour Party did yesterday, where they said, Mayor of Amityville says almost everybody not eaten by a shark.
Yeah.
The town in Jaws. It's not going to be persuasive to parents who are sending their children to school for the first time, like me.
And actually, or also just everyone else. Even
Well,
if you don't
indeed.
have to, and in fact, to some extent, it's more likely to have a negative impact on the mindset of voters who don't have children at school, because it doesn't matter that they're not personally affected. They just get this idea that something's going
and
wrong.
it's just again just an example of things crumbling and falling apart, and the government appearing not to have a grip on it. And it's Sunak's had a couple of bits of good fortune over the last couple of weeks. The GDP figures were revised up, and he can say that's turning. Inflation was a little bit lower than they had feared it might be. And it looked a little bit like the Tory narrative coming into the autumn was going to be slightly better than it was when we were last speaking, back in July. But this has just blown up out of a clear blue sky, and again is questioning the competence of the government. And don't forget, that's Sunak's calling card. The only thing he's got, frankly, in a very difficult environment for the economy and the cost of living, and 20 points behind in the polls, was to try and persuade people that he was competent and that he could do the boring grind of government well. And this is attacking that narrative pretty heavily.
Well, let's go back then. Question number 2 in the House of Commons is Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Wood Green Academy in Sandwell was on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. The head of the National Audit Office accuses him of taking a sticking plaster approach. The NAO report says he cut £869 million. The person who ran the Department for Education says he is personally responsible.
Jonathan Slater, who was
on Monday, he leapt to his own
week.
defence, saying it's utterly wrong to blame him. So why does literally everyone else say it's his fault?
Mr. Speaker, the professional advice from the technical experts on RAG has evolved over time, and indeed it is something that successive governments have dealt with, dating back to 1994, Mr. Speaker. Now, as new advice has come forward, the government has rightly, decisively and swiftly acted in the face of that advice. But he talked about school budgets and talked about what I had done, but let me just walk him through the facts of actually what that spending review did, because he brought it up. Well, no, he's brought it up, so presumably he would like to hear the facts. Funding for school maintenance and rebuilding will average £2.6 billion a year over this Parliament as a result of that spending review, which represents a 20% increase on the years before. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, far from cutting budgets, as he alleges, the amount spent last year was the highest in a decade. That spending review maintained, Mr. Speaker, that spending review maintained the school rebuilding programme, delivering 500 schools over a decade, a pace completely consistent with what had happened previously. And, Mr. Speaker, it is worth pointing out that during the parliamentary debates on that spending review, the Labour Party and him did not raise the issue of RAC one single time. So before he jumps on the next political bandwagon, he should get his facts straight.
Was quite ballsy again from Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, and this is always the thing with him. If you give him a chance to get into the weeds, he won't dance around it.
No.
He'll jump straight in, burrow as deep as he can, and throw the detail out. Attempting there. Despite all the weed stuff, I mean, I'll be honest, I think most, you can listen to that and think, yes, he's on top of it, but you can also think, I can't really follow all that. But what I did get at the end of it was, an attempt at a soundbite, which is back at Labour, which is this bandwagon jumping thing, which does come up about Starmer, that's, again, one of the few lines that they've got that lands about him. So far, he's making a decent fist of it. And, rightly pointing out this has been around since, halfway through the Blair government. But it does feel like a sort of systemic political failure.
Whenever we have an argument about money during PMQs, it will always depend on where you start and stop your measuring. So he's just said there, he talked about the biggest investment in a decade. Well, they've been in power for that entire decade. Yes. The question...
From our rubbish investment before, we have raised it now.
And he could say that the budget was going up, but it might have been the plans where it was going to go up by more. And so they took money out of it. So it's still gone up, but it's not going up.
Yeah, and then that's before you throw in real terms and all the rest of it.
When inflation is so high. The point that Keir Starmer was making, talking about Wood Green School, pre-2010, the Labour government had a Building Schools for the Future programme. It's one of the biggest rows when the coalition was formed was Michael Gove scrapped
the first thing he did, basically, was
and
scrap it.
It was a total mess. They didn't communicate it very well.
Well, again, they had a list. Everyone was looking at the list then, and the list was completely wrong.
The list was wrong. There was a huge bun fight. It was a total mess. Dominic Cummings ended up working in government as a result, which is a side issue. And the point that Keir Starmer's made is that one of those schools, scrapped in 2010, was Wood Green. They've now got problems with RAC. And had it been rebuilt or refurbished then, they might not have the problem now. And so, yeah. Let's have some more arguments about who's right and who's wrong. Let's go back to the House of Commons with Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, Carmel College in Darlington was on the Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. Yeah. And on the one hand, we have him saying it's nothing to do with him. Yeah. On the other side, we have the facts. And there's a simple way to clear this up. Yeah. Why doesn't he commit to publish the requests from the Department of Education for the school rebuilding programme and what risks he was warned of before he turned them down?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has now brought up twice the Labour school rebuildings programme. He's now brought it up twice. So let's just look at that and look at the facts surrounding that, because we do know the truth about that programme, Mr. Speaker, because the NAO, as he's called on, actually reviewed that programme later on. What did they find? They found that Labour's school rebuilding programme actually excluded 80% of schools. Next, what did they find? What did they find? That it was a third more expensive than it needed to be, needlessly wasting resources that have gone to schools. And Mr. Speaker, this is the worst bit. The worst bit is that programme, because now he's talking about the physical condition of schools, that programme only allocated funds solely on the basis of ideology, with no regard whatsoever to the physical condition of schools, Mr. Speaker. That's why the independent James Review described that programme as time-consuming and expensive, just like the Labour Party.
Oh, so now we're arguing about what happened in 2010 as a sort of distraction from...
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, at least I suppose you can commend the Tories for some decent sort of research work there. Though, if my memory serves me, that review that Sunak has just quoted at great length was commissioned by Michael Gove in order to prove that the thing was a disaster so that he could scrap it, which may explain why it was quite so damning. But yes, I mean, you know, I think Labour would have hoped... Starmer was 3-0 up at this stage, and you've got to say it's probably 3-3.
Yeah. Interestingly, just looking at the schools that Keir Starmer is choosing to highlight. So there's the one in Gravesend he mentioned to begin with, because that was the one which had fallen down. He then chose Wood Green, which is a school in the West Midlands in Wednesbury. And that last one he mentioned, Carmel College, I think, is in Darlington.
Could it be these are all marginal seats, Matthew?
I'm just putting it out there for people to do their own research and look into. But yeah, it's
Darlington certainly is.
Darlington is definitely right, and that's another. There's a political angle to this. That in tightly fought marginal seats, if you've got a school which has had to shut because of this, you know, it might not be making a big difference nationally, but they'll be having a right bun fight over it between now and the election.
They will, and it's a great opportunity for a good Labour candidate to make a big fuss and get on the front page of the local paper. And you know,
thanks to Keir Starmer raising it in the House of Commons. Correct. Okay, so that was question 4. I wonder which marginal seat the school is going to be in question number 4.
We don't want to start off with somebody leaving so early, because that's what's going to happen, Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they want more, so let me continue. Ferryhill School in County Durham was on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. The truth is, this crisis is the inevitable result of 13 years of cutting corners, botched jobs, sticking plaster politics. It's the sort of thing you expect from cowboy builders, saying that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is to blame, protesting that they've done an effing good job, even if the ceiling falls in. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is that in this case, the cowboys are running the country. Isn't he ashamed that after 13 years of Tory government, children are cowering under steel supports, stopping their classroom roof falling in?
No more. Just seriously, I will calm down. First session, I understand people are excited to be back at school.
Lindsay,
we expect better behaviour.
Ticking off Tory MPs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the kind of political opportunism that we've come... Exactly the kind of opportunism that we've come to expect from Captain Hindsight over here. Before today, he's never once raised this issue with me across this dispatch box. It wasn't even worthy of a single...
It's the same for this side as well. Can I just say, we're going to have a calmer question times going forward. I want to hear the question, I want to hear the answer, just like your constituents, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, before today, he never once raised this issue with me in Parliament. It wasn't even worthy of a single mention in his so-called landmark speech on education this summer. And if we'd listened to him, our kids would have been off school and locked down for longer. It's as simple as that. He talks about 13 years. Well, let's see what happened. When we came into office, 2/3 of schools were good and outstanding. Now it's 90%, Mr. Speaker. We introduced the pupil premium to get more funding to the most disadvantaged pupils, Mr. Speaker. Today, they are 75% more likely to go to university. And as a result of our reforms, we now have the best readers in the Western world, Mr. Speaker. That's what 13 years of education reform gets you, all of which opposed by the party opposite.
Well, there we are. I'll be doing my research on these schools. I think you're right. Basically, they are all very marginal former Labour seats. One of which, in fact, is Sedgefield.
Oh.
So the one of the schools that he brought up, I think, is in Sedgefield, previously Tony Blair's seat.
Correct.
Held by Labour for many years, taken by the Conservative Paul Howell at the last election. And he's now got a majority of, 4,500. And this just goes to show why Labour want to weaponise this. It is real life. It's not some technicality thing. It's not arguing over abstracts. Real life things happening in exactly the sort of places they need to win seats.
Yeah, and it's good politics. Some good language there. The sort of cowboys are running the country. That's the kind of a good broad brush sort of try to catch all attack on the Tories and what they've presided over. Children cowering under steel supports is quite emotive. But yeah, I mean, Sunak has got up with his Weetabix, and Boris Johnson will be sort of stirring and harumphing if he's listening to this, that Sunak has used Captain Hindsight, his preferred insult for Starmer.
For a long time.
And also, a reprise of the Labour would still have had us in lockdown stuff, which is a popular Tory line. But, the stuff at the end is a fair reflection from the Conservative point of view of what's gone right in education. The buildings might be having their problems, but the Gove reforms have given us the best readers in the Western world, and generally, overall, more schools are better than they were. So, again, I think that almost was the best exchange of the lot. But I think we're still in sort of score-drawy terrain.
It's quite... so, now I've done all my research. So, Wood Green School is in West Bromwich. West Bromwich West. Labour for many years. The Tories took it at the last election. They've got 3,800 majority there. The Carmel College, which Keir Starmer mentioned, Darlington, was held, of course, by... who was the MP there? Jenny Chapman. She was the Labour MP, lost her seat, held now by the Conservatives by 3,300.
Yeah.
And Keir Starmer giving every candidate in those target seats a massive...
Well, they're all
stick.
classic red wall seats they need to get back, essentially.
Yeah. Well, so what we're up to question number 4. Game, set and match to Sunak, says Kevin. The dreary and dull approach to asking questions was completely demolished by the facts presented by Rishi. Someone else in the text says, please, may I have the job of pulling the string that operates Suella Braverman's nodding head?
There is quite a bit of nodding.
There's quite a bit of...
She's got her serious face on today.
Serious
This is very grave.
Government
nod.
Right, let's go back to the House of Commons. We are up to question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Well, it claims to be a man of detail. There are 100 parliamentary questions from this side on this issue and an Opposition Day motion. But, Mr Speaker, let us continue. Holy Family Catholic School in Bradford was on the Labour building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there too are in a crumbling school.
Mr Holden, I think I've heard enough. No, then, this is the last time you make your mind up. You either go now or you're quiet for the rest of us.
And, Mr Speaker, if you can believe it, in April this year, the Education Secretary signed a contract for refurbishment of her offices. It's got her personal stamp of approval on it. It cost, I can't quite believe this, £34 million. Can he explain to parents whose children aren't at school this week why he thinks a blank cheque for his Tory minister's office is better use of taxpayers' money than stopping schools collapsing.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what I'd say to parents is, in the receipt of new information, we have acted decisively to ensure the safety of children and minimise disruption to education, as we have laid out and communicated extensively. That is the right thing to do. And I would also gently point out to him, Mr. Speaker, whilst the Department for Education started this process 18 months ago in spring of last year, as far as I can tell, in Labour-run Wales, they still don't know which schools are affected, Mr. Speaker. But again, he brought up this issue of funding, Mr. Speaker. And again, let's look back to what happened in that spending review. Because in that spending review, I increased the Department for Education's capital budget by 25% to a record £7 billion, Mr. Speaker. It tripled the amount that we spend on children with special education needs and disabilities. It improved the condition of the overlooked FE estate, and it set the course for per-pupil funding to be the highest ever. But it also, Mr. Speaker, crucially, invested £5 billion to help our pupils recover the lost learning from COVID. £5 billion, Mr. Speaker, and he might remember that, because we wanted pupils learning, he wanted longer lockdowns.
But I'm right, he's really pushing that one, isn't he? Longer lockdowns.
He is, and I mean, well, I'm sure there's much to talk about there, but just to leap on that last bit, there he is boasting about putting £5 billion into recovering lost learning during COVID. You go and ask Boris Johnson how much money he wanted Rishi Sunak to put into that. They commissioned a review.
Yes, Kevin
something.
Courtney? Not Kevin Costner.
Anyway,
yes,
massive expert. You've spoilt it by getting the name wrong now. I was just going to gloss over the name because I couldn't quite remember it. I think he wanted 14 billion and Rishi Sunak put in 5.
Sir Kevin Collins.
That's the fella. Big row between, the then Prime Minister and his Chancellor, and Sunak's now boasting about it. Anyway, an interesting little footnote. But, the more effective part of the Sunak answer was yet again to turn to Wales and say, they still haven't got a list of schools, they don't know what's going on, and Labour's running it. That has the potential to have an impact. But I think Starmer's finally got his nose in front with the attack on the fact that they were quite happy to sign off £34 million for the Education Secretary's office when this is money not going to schools.
And actually, there's something about sometimes these stories take off in part because of the minister at the heart of them. When everything that Chris Grayling touched turned to the opposite of gold, this stuff starts to stick. And a combination of Gillian Keegan's attitude to it, not doing media over the weekend but doing a weird video with music, then being caught on telly swearing, and her general attitude that she's not getting the thanks that she should be getting, coupled with the fact, she's got a lot of money, she wears a big watch, she's posted pictures of herself doing a charity homeless sleep out in quite an expensive looking mosquito-netted day bed in her garden.
Prada onesie or whatever it was.
Exactly. And you put all that together, and 32 million on doing up her offices, put all that together,
and that's what
she becomes a caricature.
What do people take away from this? They take away I like Gillian Keegan. She's good fun. She's outspoken. That's what's fun about her. But this is showing a degree of naivety about how you go about doing these jobs. And you can wear an expensive wristwatch. Lots of members of the cabinet do. Spending 34 million of taxpayers' money on your own office and then making a Horlicks of this, that's what the public will take away. What are they talking about in the bars? They're talking about collapsing schools, or maybe, yes. Yeah. But did you hear what she spent on her own office?
Yeah.
That's pretty damaging, isn't it?
Just to update you on the stats that I've been compiling, Keighley, that last school you mentioned, the Holy Family School in Bradford, is in the constituency of Keighley. It's got a Tory majority of 2,200.
Not for long, what you would have to say.
Having previously been a Labour Party held it before, it won it in 2017 with a majority of 239. Tories took it back. Clearly, Labour have got their eye on getting it back. I wonder which marginal seat school is going to get a mention in as we go back to the House of Commons. This is PMQs Unpacked. Matt Chorley, Tim Shipman. Let's go back to the House of Commons. It's question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
I think he just doesn't get how this "it's all fine out there" is so at odds with the lived experience of millions of working people across this country. And Mr. Speaker, let's go on. This is a long list. At least 6 schools in Essex were on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped them, and now children there are in crumbling schools. What he won't admit is the reason he cut these budgets, ignored the warnings, is quite simple. Just like he thought his tax rises were for other families to pay, he thinks his school cuts are for other families to endure. Doesn't it tell you everything you need to know? That he's happy to spend millions of taxpayers' money sprucing up Tory offices, billions to ensure there's no VAT on Tory school fees, but he won't lift a finger when it comes to protecting other people's schools, other people's safety, other people's children.
Mr. Speaker, I know he comes here with these prepared scripts, but he hasn't listened to a single fact.
From my prepared
single
scripts.
fact of 6 questions about the record amounts of funding going into schools, about the incredible reforms to education impacting the most disadvantaged children in our society, a record that we're rightly proud of. And yes, of course we can name the schools. That's because we are reacting to information and publishing that information, Mr. Speaker, so we know where the issues are, something that we're still waiting for by the Welsh Government in Wales. But Mr. Speaker, of course he wants to try and score political points of something that we are dealing with in the right and responsible way. But I do note that he has not mentioned a single other thing that has happened since we last met across these dispatch boxes.
Somebody got a pre-prepared script
to make
political
hard-working
points.
families across Britain, but what's happened? Energy bills, down, Mr. Speaker. What's happened to inflation? Down, Mr. Speaker. What's happened to small boat crossings? Down, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes, Mr. Speaker, and when it comes to economic growth, what's happened? It's gone up, Mr. Speaker. He tried time and time again to talk down the British economy, but people weren't listening, thankfully. His entire economic narrative has been demolished, and the Conservatives are getting on delivering for Britain.
Right, point of order. I need to apologise to the people of Keighley. It's pronounced Keighley, not Keighley.
Yeah.
So there's that. I think we should mark down Keir Starmer for using the phrase lived experience.
Yes, we probably should. But the point he makes, I think, is probably one of his more powerful points against Sunak, which is that by sort of getting into the weeds and saying, look what we've done and it's all going fine, the Prime Minister sometimes feels a bit detached from where the public are in terms of
I'm not against it as an argument. I just think you should not say lived experience.
No.
Or mouthfeel or any one of those phrases.
The public realm is another phrase that's beginning to jar with me.
Yeah.
I heard someone on this channel use it yesterday and I thought, yes.
And then he tried to move on. I mean, as a surprise, he attacks Keir Starmer for turning up with his pre-prepared script to score political points and then read out his own pre-prepared script to score political points. Interestingly, he boasts on his watch, energy bills are down, inflation is down, small boats are down year on year, sort of. But there's a reason he wasn't claiming it was all down to him when they went up. That was all down to international factors. And I just wonder whether or not the public are going to give the government the credit. I personally don't think any normal member of the public gives. I
don't think the public will give them credit for these things turning round. But the government's argument is always we get the blame when they go the wrong way, so we might as well try and claim the credit when it goes the other way. And more broadly, there is a sort of it's not so much that the government gets credit, but that if things feel like they're going in the right direction, people generally begin to feel a bit better about stuff.
Yeah.
But as ever, the minutiae of these things from a political point of view is not necessarily the same as the lived experience, because are energy bills down or are they just going up more slowly? Inflation down, brilliant. That just means prices are going up a bit slower. They're still going up,
and there's GDP being better than we thought. makes no difference to a normal person's life.
No, it doesn't, except that it might affect the cost of borrowing, and it sort of puts a lie to the idea that we're the total embarrassment of the whole of the G7. Though that is not an argument that is going to win too much favour in the dog and duck. Again, it's the kind of thing that can have a sort of holistic effect on the state of politics. But, yeah, I mean, sort of robust effort from,
I'm going to say they're both managed. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer wrapped this up and put a bow on it in a way that he might have been able to do.
No, I mean, Starmer hit the target, but Rishi Sunak saved more balls than he was expecting him to, and wandered out to the penalty spot and punched him on the nose a couple of times. I mean, is this a good week for the government? No, of course it isn't. But I would say it was 6-4 at worst, and frankly, if you'd asked most Tory strategists this morning, they'd have taken that.
Yeah.
And I think most Tory MPs by the end were breathing a sigh of relief and indeed getting excitable in that confected way that they do when they think, we've sort of seen this off. So, it was not 6 goals into a clean open net.
And it wasn't a sort of a phrase, it's not a week, you lead my party, you follow your party, I lead. A huge moment like this, which we think captures everything that should be the argument against the government. It's not clear that Keir Starmer quite put the lid on that. But talking of confected excitement, Lara Spirit's here next with the best of the rest. She's been watching the rest of PMQs so that you don't have to. We will do that next here on Times Radio.
On the web and via the Times Radio app. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
I need a big flavour.
A what?
I mean a favour. Sorry, I think I need a wrap. I mean nap.
Sounds like someone has flavour on the brain. Get wrapped up in flavour with McDonald's Big Flavour Wraps. The sweet chilli chicken one. Today's $1.99 wrap of the day. From 11 a.m. Wrap of the day discount not available on delivery orders. Price may vary, subject to availability.
Nothing's hit the Bank of Santander harder than Santander's millions in cashback.
So we've all seen Santander's annoyingly great cashback thingy.
They've got cashback.
We're gonna fight back.
We believe in you and you. So what are we gonna do?
Fight! What do fighters do?
Win!
So what are we gonna do?
Dunno.
Santander customers get a share of over £10 million in cashback every month.
The monthly figure is based on cashback paid across a number of Santander products during the last 6 months.
For all the breaking news and the latest in culture and entertainment, listen to Mariella Frostrup, Monday to Thursday afternoons from 1 on Times Radio. This is Times Radio.
Very good afternoon. It's Matt Chorley live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel, bringing you PMQs Unpacked. Lara Spirit's here, Times Red Box Editor. She's been watching the best of the rest on the backbenches so that you don't have to. Overall, Lara, the mood?
They were quite badly behaved today.
Oh,
At one point, Richard Holden was nearly kicked out. He's, of course, actually a minister, but there was a lot of jeering. I think there always is. Maybe it's just felt slightly more rude today.
It felt like Lindsay Hoyle's sort of cape. He looked very headmasterly today, didn't he? There's this sort of, oh dear, class, you're back. And I much preferred the empty school over the summer.
There was that moment when he almost kicked out. There was a moment where he suddenly thought, am I going to kick this government minister out? And then he sort of stepped back from it. It was like, no, I think
one last chance.
One last chance. If I give you one more warning. So who are we going to go for first then?
I mean, obviously, we're going for Stephen Flynn.
Obviously. Give the people what they want.
His questions weren't actually his best, but I feel like it's not fair not to do Stephen Flynn, seeing as we haven't heard from him for a while. And this second one on the cost of living, I do think is important because people might have missed that Stephen Flynn actually did reshuffle his team this week. It wasn't just Sir Keir Starmer and last week Rishi Sunak who did it. So we have had a reshuffle. That reshuffle, in fact, people have said represents the fact that Stephen Flynn, differently to Humza Yousaf north of the border, is keen to make his Westminster operation more focused on the cost of living and less focused on constitutional issues like independence, which Yousaf thinks will be dominating the next election. So have a listen to this.
Mr. Speaker, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the Prime Minister thinks everything is all right. But let's look at his proposals for the winter when it comes to a cost of living package. Because when it comes to energy bills, his plan, of course, is to do nothing. When it comes to mortgage bills, his plan is to do nothing. And when it comes to food bills, his plan is to do nothing. So when the when the Secretary of State for Education said earlier this week that everyone was doing nothing, she was referring to the Prime Minister, wasn't she? Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I think is a little bit out of practice, because when it comes to energy bills, what we have done is pay for around half of a typical family's energy bill over the past year. Support worth £1,500, Mr. Speaker, benefiting families in Scotland. He asks about mortgages, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's Mortgage Charter covers 90% of the mortgage market and ensures that a typical mortgage holder can save hundreds of pounds a month when it comes to their mortgage refinancing. And when he talked about energy, thanks to the actions of this government, we are supporting the hundreds of thousands of jobs in the Scottish oil and gas industry, securing this country's energy supply, something that he opposes. I will always do what's right for the people of Scotland, Mr. Speaker, and it's time the SNP did the same.
You're right, wasn't Stephen Flynn's
wasn't his best
punchist, but he basically got the same response from Rishi Sunak regardless.
Yeah, and I mean, Rishi Sunak feels like this is a good week, given that we had those revised figures on growth to be talking about the economy. I think given every other issue that he could have been asked about this week, he feels most comfortable probably on that ground. So not a great attack line, I think it's fair to say, from Stephen Flynn, I'm afraid.
Very good. Right, so let's move on. What was better then from the backbenchers?
Well, this was very interesting, albeit not entirely surprising, seeing as we saw her ask a question to similar effect of Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, earlier in the week. But Dame Priti Patel, of course, the former Home Secretary, asked probably the most sticky question, I would say, that Rishi Sunak faced from his own backbenchers today when she pressed Rishi Sunak on schools. So have a listen to this.
Speaker, the Prime Minister is aware of how the RAC issue has really affected schools in Essex. We've got a high number of schools that have been impacted, and he's rightly said today that the government's doing everything it can to get children back to school. Can he try to commit, and I know there's a debate later on today, to fully funding both the capital and revenue costs that are associated with getting children back into school? And I would hope that he would commit to meeting the leader of Essex County Council, because they are pioneering some great reforms right now where they're looking to support, maintain schools, as well as academy trusts. And I think actually the government could get some good insights in terms of how we can get children back to school fast, and also look at the funding model for this.
Can I first of all start by thanking my right honourable friend for the engagement constructively that she's had with the department, and indeed pay tribute to her school leaders and local authority for everything that they are doing. I am happy to give her the reassurance, as the Chancellor already said, new funding will be provided to schools to deal with this issue, but also to ensure that we can get through this as quickly as possible for her constituents and parents, and indeed everyone's. DfE are in the process of increasing the number of dedicated caseworkers from 50 to 80. We have 35 project directors regionally on the ground to support, and we've increased the number of survey firms by more than double, Mr. Speaker, so that we can rapidly, over the next few weeks, fully assess all the relevant schools and have a mitigation plan in place.
Now, this is really striking, because Keir Starmer mentioned 6 schools in Essex, but it was reported yesterday there were 54 schools in Essex with potential RAC concrete, 15 of them run by Essex County Council, 39 run by academy trusts. Obviously, there was a lot of this concrete around in Essex in the 70s or whatever. And it's interesting that, explain with the difference that Priti Patel was asking about, the difference between capital and revenue.
Well, she is very keen that Rishi Sunak meet with Essex County Council for them to basically explain that, because he's saying he wasn't responsible for making these cuts. The government has invested a record amount. Actually, they aren't to blame. And Priti Patel, very subtly, I think, given that, of course, she is a Conservative MP and she doesn't want to necessarily outwardly criticise Rishi Sunak, is basically saying other people know more than you about this issue and you need to talk to them.
And he's sort of just talking in general terms about money, and the argument is being over the capital money, which is for the buildings. So if you need to knock down a building and rebuild it or fix it in some way, that's a capitalist money. But if with some of these schools, they're talking about busing children to another school, who's paying for that bus? And the schools are saying the government should pay, and the government, says it's going to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
This is the sticky issue because, of course, Jeremy Hunt on the airwaves this weekend said we will do everything it takes, we will fund what's necessary. And actually, it seems that that's very unclear, given that earlier last week, but schools were told, if you are making alternative arrangements and mitigations, those will come out of your existing budgets.
Tim, I was thinking only yesterday we didn't heard from Priti Patel very often.
Dame Priti Patel.
Dame Priti Patel, if you don't mind. But it's interesting she's chosen to go on this at PMQs when clearly she's got a massive issue on her plate in her constituency.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, she probably wouldn't have been thanked for going on anything else by her constituents. Yeah. She did it politely, but there was a definite air of the smiling steel behind there, wasn't there, as you've been discussing. Surely not gently suggesting that someone knows more about something than Rishi Sunak.
Surely not.
Normally has stared at every problem until all the facts submit to his will.
In fact, Labour have just put out statements saying that they've been through the list that the Department for Education has released, and 19 of the schools which have got the reinforced autoclave aerated concrete had building projects cancelled in 2010. So 19 schools which were literally part of the Building Schools for the Future, cancelled by Michael Gove. They've now got the... I mean, whether or not it would have been dealt with is, a separate question. But it's clearly now they've got 19 schools, potentially 19 seats where they can really hammer that point home. Where else are we going, Laura?
We're going to Craig Kinley, who is another Conservative MP, but is raising the issue of small boats and is trying to place the blame, I think, quite pointedly on the door of the EU. So have a listen to this and make up your own minds about whether or not it might work as an attack line in the next election.
Very good.
I'd like to offer some assistance on the small boats issue. Has my right honourable friend considered the incongruity of the fact that a UK dinghy manufacturer trying to sell into the EU market would have to apply the CE marking, customs codes and the potential of being stopped and checked? And similar applies perversely when a simple thing like GB to NI trade. But none of this applies, seemingly, when these huge, supersized, dangerous, cut-and-shut dinghies are taken in from Turkey across the EU border into Bulgaria and Greece. Is he as confused as I am by the EU's double standards on this matter?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right that we must do all we can to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration. And we know that the export of small boats across parts of the European continent is a vital element of the smuggling gang's tactics. And that's why, specifically, we are stepping up joint operations with Turkey, Mr. Speaker. And I raised this with the President when we spoke, so that we can tackle organised immigration crime and specifically disrupt the supply chain of boat parts that are used for these dangerous crossings. And I will continue to keep him updated on our progress.
Look, Paul,
I didn't really understand what he was talking about there.
I think what he was basically... What the Prime Minister was talking about.
No, what Craig McKinley was talking about.
It's a sort of clever point that, we would have... In order to send a small boat to France, we would have to comply with their codes. Yeah. And yet, where do all these amazing big small boats come from that don't comply with the EU? You'd think they'd... Instead of... I mean, it's a sort of fatuous point to say, why don't you stop the smugglers by banning their boats and saying they're not EU compliant?
It's almost like the people smugglers aren't big adherents to health and safety legislation. Yeah. And the kite mark that you might find... But
surely this is a violation of the purity of the single market and ought to be,
clamped down upon.
Someone ought to come down on it like a ton of bricks.
I mean, it's an interesting point. I suppose it allowed Rishi Sunak to repeat what he wants to say and turn the focus back on some of his pledges.
Yeah.
Have we got anyone else?
We have got a final one today because we have slightly more time. And this just made me think, I feel like we've had a week where everybody has been trying to ban lots of things. You see that disposable vapes are probably to be banned in Scotland. Obviously, we banned machetes last week, even though actually it's not like you were necessarily really allowed them beforehand. Laughing gas is now going to be banned from the end of the year. But here is Flo Anderson, I think, raising an interesting question about what actually constitutes a ban and when a ban means a real ban, and that's over plastic in wet wipes, which I'll admit doesn't sound hugely interesting, but just take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, billions of wet wipes go out into our rivers and oceans and clog up our sewers. Yeah. I've been campaigning on this for years to ban plastic in wet wipes, and the government has finally promised to ban plastic in wet wipes, but that was 5 months ago and there's been nothing since then. So will the Prime Minister today finally give a date when that ban will come into force and make a difference to our environment? Or is this another broken promise from his zombie government?
Speaker, in the comprehensive plan for water that was published by the Environment Secretary in April, we did confirm our intention to ban wet wipes containing plastic, subject, of course, as is legally proper, subject to a public consultation. That consultation will be launched in the coming months in autumn of this year, and I know ministers will keep the House updated on progress.
Craig McKinley.
Ban everything, Lara.
Yeah.
Maybe we should start with banning everything and then just agree to lift bans on a case-by-case basis. Do you use a lot of wet wipes in your house, Tim?
We use a phenomenal amount, and I've never once put one down the loo.
No. It's
very, very bad.
Very, very bad. I feel like I need to ask you now, Lara. Do you use a lot of wet wipes?
No, I actually don't. I don't think I've used a wet wipe in a
Well, the
really...
big
I
difference
did
is
use one in the...
Tim's got small children. I think it's for toweling himself.
Yeah, we have some very dry ones that have been there for probably years in the Parliament office in Westminster, which occasionally I used to.
The only time I've ever seen an adult use a wet wipe was at a Labour Party conference a few years ago, where one of the hotels ended up with no water, and I remember a columnist for the Daily Mirror sitting in a curry house using wet wipes to wash himself. It's one of the most unpleasant things I've ever seen in my life.
Well, on that visual image, Kevin Maguire?
It was Kevin Maguire.
On that visual image,
he was given 2 litres of water by the hotel with which to drink and a blute, and he resorted to wet wipes.
Well, there we are. Thank you very much, Tim Shipman, Chief Political Commentator of the Sunday Times. Lara Spirit, Times Red Box Editor. We'll be in your inbox.
3 p.m.
3 p.m. with your PMQs Unpacked email, rounding up everything you need to know about what's been going on at PMQs today. We'll have PMQs Unpacked. We'll be back same time next week. Up next, we're going to speak to one of the brand new MPs that Keir Starmer congratulated at the start of PMQs. Is that next? And we'll play the quiz on Times Radio.
Early breakfast on Times Radio with Personio, the all-in-one HR software solution that works for your business. Listen to Times Radio every weekday morning from 5 for a fresh take on all the stories making the morning headlines, reviewing the front pages you're waking up to and making sure you start the day well informed. Early breakfast on Times Radio with Personio, the all